Rolling in next is Regine Hardiman, who is going to talk to us about librarians and Wikidata.
Yes, I am. Hi, everybody. So if you can hear me and see my screen, this is about librarians and Wikidata. It's a short tour. We're not going to get really into the technical aspects of Wikidata, but would love to show you some of the things that can be done with Wikidata and some things that folks have done. For myself, I'm really not a technical person, a technicist. I made that word up. I'm sort of a library engagement engineer. I just love to get people together to use libraries and use the resources that are available. So I'm not coming from a technical point of view, but I am coming from here's what can be done with Wikidata. And it's a short tour. So we're just going to do a quick overview of Wikidata, talk about some case studies. They're not really case studies, they're examples. One would be by Cohen, who is a librarian in Israel, and Steve Bauskauf, who works for Vanderbilt University. And then I'm going to talk about the Festival of Lights, which is a Canadian festival. And then I'm just going to show some ways to outreach. There's so many ways that you can get involved with Wikidata, and we'll have a little end tour example. So Wikidata is about 8 years old, almost 9. It was created in 2012. And what it is a free, collaborative, multilingual, structured database for structured data to be reused from Wikipedia and to be used outside of Wikipedia. It's easy to add to, and then once you have data in Wikidata, you can run queries using Sparkle. We're not going to get into that today, but just to let you know, you can put data in and you can certainly take it out. And this is where librarians are having kind of a good time with Wikidata. So just very, very briefly, this chart is just an example of what the properties are in Wikidata. So with everything with Wikidata, there's a Q number, which is the unique identifier of an item. And then there's the P number, which is a property. And it's kind of like a sentence where the Q number has a property and that relates to a value. And everything is coded. And one thing about Wikidata, if, for instance, you go in there and you find something that hasn't been coded in terms of a property, you can create that as you like. So we're going to talk about two people, Ahava Cohen and Steve Bauskauf, and then the Festival of Lights in Canada, and then a little bit about the LD4 Wikidata Affinity Group. So Ahava Cohen, she is the head of Hebrew Cataloging Department at the National Library of Israel. And what she does and what she talks about is when she first came to Wikidata, she found some unique constraints based on where she's at. For one thing, they have 4 languages. They have Arabic, Russian, English, and Hebrew. So already they have 4 different languages that they want to add in when they're talking about Wikidata. Not only are there 4 languages, but many of those languages are not Latin languages. They're symbolic, and they also don't read right to left like WorldCat reads. They read left to right, right to left. They read in the opposite direction. So these were some stumbling blocks that she found when she wanted to add her research to Wikidata. The other thing also was in Hebrew, in Jewish culture, there's a lot of family naming of relatives and ancestors, and there are many people that have the same name. So she found that to be a little bit of a constraint. And also at the National Library of Israel, I think they do a lot of cataloging of things that have been self-published. And so once something has been published over 20 editions of it, they will add that to their WikiData, to their catalog. So what AHA does, and she talks about it all the time, is she meticulously worked with the metadata that she had, putting it into WikiData, expanding all the different, not complications, but all the different facets of the way that her types of information, her types of languages needed to be explained, needed to be cataloged. And then she would crosswalk that with her authority, her authority rules and her other catalogs that she had. And she does talk about this all the time. So because of her work, which you can look up, she found that WikiData was a great search engine for properties, metadata, and she created her own crossworks, as I mentioned. And that's Ahava, who is I meant to mention that both Steve and Ahava, they're just wonderful people that really share their experience and make it very engaging for you to understand what they're doing. And that's one of the reasons why I picked these two. So Steve Boskoff is at Vanderbilt, and his big contribution, well, he's made many. He is the data science and data curation specialist with the Jean and Alexander Hurd Library at Vanderbilt. But one of his contributions is called Vanderbot. And Vanderbot is a tool in Wikidata that can take the information in researchers and professionals' CVs and pour it into Wikidata, so it can be searched and cataloged. The other thing that Steve does, which I find is wonderful, he has a lot of blogs and he talks about and explains kind of in a very, not technical, but in a very detail-oriented, but not put-offish way, how you can collect your data in a spreadsheet and just kind of move it over to Wikidata. So Steve and Ahava are two of my favorite Wikidata people. The Northern Lights I'm just checking time, festival was a project, a research project that was done in Canada. And I bring it up because it shows, I know many people are thinking about using Wikidata to archive their communities and wondering how they can do that. So the Northern Lights Festival, the researchers actually organized this, not organized the festival, but organized the breakdown of the information that was in the festival based on what types of musicians, my printer broke this morning, I'm sorry, so I have to check with my digital file, which is a little harder for me. But the festival, the musicians, how the musicians played, what types of instruments they played, what time they came on, how many people were at the event. And so it really shows a way that you can get into a community activity and you can find a way to get the information that you need into Wikidata that can therefore be searched later. Another thing about this Northern Lights Festival is one thing that they cited in their research project was a project that my colleagues at Pratt School of Information did a couple of years ago, was link jazz. So the learning of how to link open data to Wikidata is inherent in this kind of a project and also in the linked jazz project. So how do you reach out? How do you find out? There, like with everything with Wikipedia, there are the straight up newbies, and then there are the folks that are extremely technical and everybody in between. So what are some of the things that you can do? Well, there are some global Facebook groups, and they're very approachable. So there's the Wikidata community on Facebook. Then there's the Wikidata plus GLAM. And of course, GLAM is galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And then there's GLAM and the Wiki Global, because Wikidata is definitely a global endeavor. And even though these groups are on Facebook, if you don't like Facebook, that's fine, because they all have their own presence inside the Wiki universe. But the Facebook is a way to get to know what's going on and who's there. And again, they're very approachable. The fourth one on Facebook is the Wikipedia on Libraries. And the Wikipedia on Libraries is really, really a good group of people. You can subscribe. The top left is a way to subscribe, and you can find their archives, which I put a little snapshot of there. So basically, since I think they've been meeting since October 2011 or July 2011, they have every meeting that they've had, and they have monthly meetings. This is the LD4 group, where you can go in, you can go to this library archives here, you can go in, you can read, you can download everything that they talked about in the meeting. And the wonderful thing about LD4 is they always have guests, guest projects, and they're very open to new people as well as the technically savvy. And that's a good way to sort of get your feet wet. And they are on Facebook, but they're also inside Wikipedia. So I'm just going to talk a little bit, two things. So the WLUG, if you don't know, is the Wikipedia Libraries Users Group. And a couple of years ago, we put together a resource guide for librarians. And in this resource guide, which has many things, but the WikiData guide will introduce you to all types of trainings and ways of getting and finding more about Wikipedia, Wikidata. So that's the WLG user group resource page, and that's there for you. And then the last thing I wanted to do was Wikidata really lends itself to some visualizations. So we're just going to take a peek at some of the visualization tools that are available. And this is just one set. There are many. The one I wanted to look at is compare it. I mean, you can look at any of these, but when I looked at it this morning, I saw that you can compare credit cards, which was interesting. And all of this data is being pulled from Wikidata. And you're visualizing all these different credit cards worldwide. And you can, of course, click in and find the Wikidata page for each. This is a Wikidata page. This is the Q number. What I was saying, the Q number is the identifier. Every single item in Wikidata has a Q number, a particular Q number. Then it tells you the language, the statements, what it's an instance of. So this is the property, and all Wikidata pages look similar to that. So given that, that's the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I hope I took a good amount of time, and we'll see if we have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Regine. And we're good with time. So yeah, I see there's one question already.
Can't see the link opened. Oh, so you didn't see the link, or was that for me?
I think so.
Yeah, I think you were just sharing your PowerPoint. So when you clicked over to look at that Wikidata entry, we didn't see it. So maybe you could just share your screen again and share that entry so we can see.
Sure. Give me 1 second. 1 second. So if I share screen and just go to the internet, is that fine?
Yes.
Where would I do that? Give me one. Google Chrome, right? Okay. Here? Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, so this was the visualized data. And then I think the other one that I went to was the the WLG users group, but I'll find that. But the visualized data, so I went here. So everything in Wikidata is subject to be visualized, and I went to compare it. And then there's several options here. And so I went to credit cards. And here is a list of credit cards compared, being pulled from Wikidata. And I think I went to HSBC. Okay, so here is a Wikidata page. And what I was saying was every item in Wikidata has its own queue number, has its own unique queue number, and that is the item. But then there are properties. So this is an instance of a credit card. Credit card would be the property. And Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation would be an instance of who is taking care of the credit card. And then all Wikidata pages will have this basic introduction of what language is here, what is the instance of, etc. And then I'll just, give me 1 second and I'll just go back to the resources because I don't think you guys saw that. One moment. One second. I'm not sure if you're seeing that, or do I need to go back to shared screen? Are we seeing that? The users group?
No, not seeing
Okay,
that.
all right, so let me go back
Thanks.
to, okay. Zoom is, okay. So where was I? Sorry. Let me stop sharing, go back to sharing one more time. Share Chrome. Here I am. Okay, so are you seeing this now, the Wikimedia Library User Group Resource List?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a list we put together. So Wikipedia and Library Users Group, WLUG, is a group. And actually, I think this month we're having a sort of an open house for folks. Has a lot of resources. If you go to the Wikidata one, you will find general resources and training exercises and relevant projects from Wikidata. As with everything with Wikipedia Universe, there's always a rabbit hole and you can go down the rabbit hole really quickly. But I think with Wikidata, between the resources that I gave you, particularly with Ahava Cohen and Steve Bauskov, they're very good at presenting things in a very kind of leisurely way that makes you want to learn. So if I'm beginning with Wikidata, I would definitely find training and teachers that speak to me and make it easy for me to engage, because like I said, it goes the whole gamut of technical expertise. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, thank you, Leslie. I think the use of Wikidata for archiving communities and events is untapped right now, and people are, because of the pandemic, everybody's thinking about what's going on in their community. But it's really easy to get started with Wikidata because it's not like Wikipedia, where you go to Wikipedia and if you have a statement, you need to have verifiable sources and you need to list these sources. I mean, it's very strict about that. Wikidata is a little less strict. You don't have to cite, but you do have to prove that the information that you're adding is correct. But it's more about, you know, assigning these properties to particular items than it is about writing articles about something. So if you have a community event, like the festival event, you could talk about, you know, your musicians and what music they had, or you could, or if you're having a book sale, or any kind of way you want to describe your event. If the property is not in Wikidata already, you can actually create it. So it's a little more fun. So are there local history folks using? I'm starting to hear about that, and I can follow up on that because I think that's important. Most of the Wikidata folks are using it in libraries and academic libraries. Not most of them, but most of the ones that are really gearing up and gung-hoing are either in academic libraries or really the technical aspects of Wiki. And lastly, I did want to say that the info box that's in Wikipedia and that comes up on Google is actually also being fed by Wikidata. So if you have a subject that you want to write about in Wikipedia, you can start with Wikidata and you can put sort of all that basic information, birth, gender, which is a subject. I know we just went over that. Gender is a subject that is a little sensitive. And I think they're even sort of adding, they've added like transgender and things, so you don't have to particularly say a gender if you want. But all this basic demographic information, if you have an article that you want to write in Wikipedia, you can go to Wikidata first, add it there. And then when you go to the article, you can pull in that information from Wikidata for your info box. So, yeah.
So thank you so much, Regine. Round of applause.
Thank you.